Ryan Whitmore grabbed Ethan Walker's collar in front of the entire neighborhood, screaming, veins bulging, 20 years old, and absolutely certain he was about to destroy this quiet, forgettable man in front of everyone who mattered. Ethan didn't flinch, not even a little. And that single moment, that terrifying stillness, was when Ryan realized he had made the worst mistake of his life. But here's what nobody in that neighborhood knew yet. The man Ryan just grabbed had once survived 3 days behind enemy lines with a bullet in his shoulder and nobody coming to save him. Drop a comment with your city below. I want to see how far this story travels. And if you're new here, hit subscribe. You won't want to miss what happens next. Ethan Walker woke up at 4:47 a.m. Not because an alarm told him to. Not because of habit exactly. He woke up because after 15 years in the Navy SEALs, his body had simply stopped trusting silence. Some part of his brain, the part that had been rewired by years of sleeping in hostile terrain, listening for footsteps in the dark, calculating threats before his eyes were fully open, that part never fully powered down. He lay in bed for 30 seconds. Listened. The house was quiet. The neighborhood was quiet. Colorado in early summer had that particular kind of pre-dawn stillness that felt almost sacred, like the world was holding its breath before it started its engines again. He heard Lily breathing through the wall. Slow. Even. Safe. That was the only alarm that mattered. Ethan swung his legs over the side of the bed, sat up and pressed his palms flat against his thighs. A habit from his early SEAL days, his old team leader had told him. First thing every morning, feel the ground beneath you. Remind yourself you're still here. He was still here. He pulled on a worn gray t-shirt, a pair of old sweatpants with a frayed left cuff, and his running shoes that probably had 300 miles past their expiration date. He didn't care. He drank a glass of water standing at the kitchen sink, looked out the back window at the yard, and then stepped out the front door into the cool Colorado morning. The street was empty. He liked it that way. He ran 4 miles. Same route every morning. Not because he needed to, he'd been out of active service for 3 years now, and nobody was grading his physical fitness anymore. He ran because it was the 1 hour of the day that belonged entirely to him. Before Lily needed breakfast. Before client emails started piling up. Before the world made its demands. 4 miles of quiet pavement and his own thoughts. When he got back to the house, he stretched on the front porch, and that was when he first noticed the truck. It was a massive blacked-out pickup, the kind that costs more than some people's houses, parked halfway onto the curb in front of the old Henderson property next door. The Henderson house had been empty for 6 months. Ethan had watched it get repainted, refloored, landscaped. Professional crews working fast and expensive. Somebody with money was moving in. A moving company was already unloading. Big furniture. A gym cage system. A heavy bag. A 70-inch television still in the box. And leaning against the truck phone in one hand, coffee cup in the other, wearing a black designer tracksuit that probably cost $500, was a young man who looked like he'd been assembled specifically to irritate people. 20, maybe 21. Built. Loud, even in his silence, the way he stood, the way he looked at everything around him, like it was slightly beneath his interest, the casual arrogance radiating off him like heat off asphalt. He glanced over at Ethan. Ethan nodded once, polite, brief. The young man looked him up and down, the old sweatpants, the faded shirt, the running shoes, and smirked. Then he looked away, already bored. Ethan went inside. Hi, Maud, Lily's lunch. Packed it in the blue container she'd had since 6th grade, the one with the small crack on the corner that she refused to replace because she said, "It has character, Dad." He made coffee, scrambled eggs, and toast with strawberry jam, her favorite, and had it on the table by the time she came downstairs in her school clothes, with her hair still half-finished, earbuds, already in phone, already in hand. "Morning," she said, dropping into her chair and pulling out one earbud. "Morning," he said. "Eat before it gets cold." She looked at the plate, then up at him. "You already ran 4 miles. You're insane." "Yes," he said. "Eat your eggs." She ate. He drank his coffee. They didn't talk much. Lily was 15, and mornings weren't her strongest time, But it was a comfortable quiet, the kind that came from years of just being together without needing to fill the space. "New neighbor moved in," Ethan said. "The big house." "Yeah." "What are they like?" Ethan thought about the young man with the smirk. "Don't know yet," he said. His name, Ethan learned over the next few days, was Ryan Whitmore. The neighborhood had a way of distributing information without anyone actually trying conversations over fences. Words exchanged at the mailbox, the quiet social telegraph of a suburban street. Within a week, Ethan knew the basic outline. Ryan was the son of Victor Whitmore, a real estate developer out of Denver with a reputation for building expensive things and making enemies in the process. Victor had bought the Henderson house as a gift for Ryan, his 20-year-old son, who was apparently a serious amateur MMA fighter with real potential, according to people who repeated things they'd read online. Ryan wasn't living there with his father. He was living there alone, with his gym equipment, his expensive cars, a Porsche Cayenne and a matte black Challenger, both of which Ryan seemed incapable of parking without taking up 1.5 spaces. His friends who came and went at all hours, loud and careless in the way that people are when they've never had to consider other people. The music was the first thing. Not music, exactly music was the wrong word. It was bass. Seismic structural bass at 11 o'clock at night that made the pictures on Ethan's walls vibrate slightly. Ethan lay in bed the first night it happened and did what he'd been trained to do. He assessed the situation. Is this a crisis? No. Is this a problem I need to address immediately? No. Is this going to stop on its own? He waited. At 12:30 a.m., it stopped. He went to sleep. The second night it happened again. Started at 10:15. He waited. At 1:00 a.m., it was still going. He got up, walked to the front door, opened it, and stood on his porch for a moment. Through Ryan's lit-up windows, he could see people moving, laughing. A party. Fine. Young people had parties. He was 20 once. He understood. He went back inside and put in the earplugs he kept in his nightstand from his active duty days. Slept 6 hours. Got up at 4:47. Ran 4 miles. He told himself it would get better. It didn't get better. It wasn't any single thing. It was the accumulation of 100 small aggressions delivered with a smile. Ryan's Challenger parked half-blocking Ethan's driveway. Not enough to prevent him from getting out, but enough to make it inconvenient enough to send a message. The music on weeknights. The friends who threw their fast food bags over the fence into Ethan's yard and never once looked back. The time Ryan's girlfriend leaned on the hood of Ethan's truck, which he was actively trying to back out of his driveway, and took 10 minutes finishing a phone conversation before moving, never acknowledging him once. Ethan registered all of it. He said nothing. Because he knew from experience that most problems resolve themselves if you give them time and space. Because he had enough self-awareness to know that his instincts, sharpened over 15 years of high-stakes operations, could sometimes overread civilian situations. Because Lily was watching how he handled it, and he was always aware of what lesson he was teaching her. So he waited. And then Ryan made it about Lily. Chag. It happened on a Thursday afternoon. Lily had 3 friends over, Maya, Priya, and a quiet girl named Sophie, who Ethan had met twice and liked immediately because she said please and thank you without being prompted. 4 15-year-old girls sitting in the front yard, doing what 15-year-old girls do, talking, laughing, listening to music through a small Bluetooth speaker, absolutely nothing offensive about any of it. Ryan came out of his house with 2 of his friends. Big guys, early 20s, wearing the practiced, bored expressions of people who believed they were permanently the most interesting thing in any room. Ryan stopped on his front lawn and looked over at the girls. "Hey," he called out. Lily looked up. "You," Ryan said, pointing at her. "You live here?" "Yeah," Lily said, careful, picking up the vibe immediately. "Your dad's the guy with the old truck?" "Yes." Ryan grinned and glanced back at his friends. "No offense, but your old man looks like he's one bad day away from asking me for $1. His friends laughed. Lily went very still. Ethan, who was visible through the window and heard every word, went still too. But for a completely different reason. He watched his daughter's face. Watched her work through it, the embarrassment, the anger, the calculation of how to respond without making it worse. "Okay," Lily said quietly. She looked back down at her phone. "What, no comeback?" Ryan pressed. "Come on. Tell your dad to mow his lawn at least. This whole side of the street is embarrassing." "Ryan, man, let it go," one of his friends said, but the other one was still laughing. "I'm just being honest," Ryan said, spreading his hands. "Neighborhood has standards." Lily didn't respond. She was staring at her phone, jaw tight, and Ethan could see from the window that her hands were gripping it too hard. He walked to the front door. He opened it. He stepped onto the porch. Not fast, not dramatic. He just appeared standing there in his old jeans and his faded green shirt, and he looked at Ryan. The yard went quiet. Ryan turned, saw Ethan. Smiled wider, the entertained smile of someone who thought this was going to be fun. "Hey neighbor," Ryan said. "We were just—" "I heard," Ethan said. His voice was completely flat, not angry, not loud, just completely, utterly absent of warmth. Ryan blinked. Something in the tone stopped him for half a second. Some primal thing, the kind of warning signal that exists in human beings below the level of conscious thought. Then his ego buried it. "Look, I was just—" "Ryan." Ethan walked down the porch steps. He stopped at the edge of his yard, 6 feet from the fence line. "These are children. Go back inside." Ryan's eyes narrowed. His friends went quiet. The girls didn't move. "Children," Ryan repeated. He looked around, performing amusement for his audience. "Dude, they're like 15. "I know exactly how old they are," Ethan said. "Go back inside." A long beat. Ryan opened his mouth, closed it. The something that had briefly made him pause came back stronger this time. There was nothing threatening in Ethan's posture. Nothing aggressive. He was just standing there. But the way he was standing, the absolute economic stillness of him. The sense that every part of his body was arranged with complete deliberateness. It didn't read like an angry dad. It didn't read like anything Ryan knew how to categorize. "Whatever," Ryan said. He glanced at his friends. "Come on." They went inside. When Ethan turned back to the yard, Lily was looking at him with an expression he couldn't quite read. "You didn't have to do that," she said. "I know," he said. "I had it." "I know," he said again. A pause. "Dad, your face," she said. "You looked—" She stopped. Started again. "You looked different." "Go back to your friends," he said. She studied him for another second. Then she turned back to Maya and Priya and Sophie, who had gone carefully quiet, and said something that made them all laugh, and just like that, the moment dissolved back into a normal Thursday afternoon. Ethan went inside. He washed the 2 coffee mugs in the sink, dried them, put them away. His hands were perfectly steady. That night, after Lily was in bed, Ethan sat at the kitchen table with a glass of water and did something he had learned to do a long time ago. He analyzed the situation the way he'd been trained to analyze any environment where a threat was present. Because that's what this was now. Not a nuisance, not an annoying neighbor, a threat to his daughter. He thought about Ryan, 20 years old, athletic, clearly aggressive, insecure in the way that certain young men are insecure, the kind where confidence is a performance rather than a foundation, where any perceived disrespect becomes a personal emergency. An MMA background meant physical capability, but more importantly, it meant an identity built around dominance and combat. That kind of identity in a person with poor impulse control and a wealthy father who'd always solved problems with money could escalate. I thought about what he'd seen in Ryan's eyes today. That moment of pause, the split second before Ryan's ego reasserted itself. That was important. It told Ethan that beneath all the performance, some part of Ryan had seen something and recognized it. Not consciously, not in any way Ryan could articulate, but somewhere deep. Good, Ethan thought. That means he's not entirely unreachable. But it also meant that the next interaction would matter enormously. If Ryan perceived Ethan's restraint as fear, which was the most likely interpretation for someone who thought in terms of dominance, things would get worse before they got better. He thought about that. He thought about Lily. He went to bed. He woke up at 4:47, ran 4 miles. The following 2 weeks were a kind of low-grade war. Nothing dramatic. Nothing that you could point to and say unambiguously this crossed the line. Ryan had learned something from the Thursday incident, but what he'd learned, as Ethan had predicted, was not restraint. What he'd learned was that overt confrontation with Ethan felt risky in a way he couldn't explain and didn't like. So he shifted tactics. He made it social. Ryan was charming when he wanted to be. Ethan could see that clearly. The guy had a face that photographed well, and he knew it. He knew how to deploy a grin. He knew how to make a room feel like the energy increased when he walked in. He started working the neighborhood the way politicians work rooms, talking to people, bringing them into his orbit, establishing himself as the fun one, the generous one, the young energy that made the street feel alive again. And in the middle of that charm campaign, he planted seeds, small things, comments delivered with a laugh so they couldn't be called attacks. Ethan seems like a good guy, just kind of a loner, right? You ever actually have a full conversation with him? Or, I tried to introduce myself, and he looked at me like I'd insulted his mother. Is he like that with everyone? Or most calculatedly, I feel kind of bad for his daughter. She seems great, but you know, growing up with just him, that's got to be tough. Ethan heard about the comments secondhand. The neighborhood social telegraph worked in both directions. He processed each one. He was not angry, not exactly. He was something colder and more focused than anger. Something that in a different context, in a different version of his life, would have been the emotion that preceded action. He recognized the feeling. He managed it the way he'd always managed it. He breathed through it, analyzed it, and filed it in the appropriate compartment. But there was one compartment he didn't have room for: the comment about Lily. Growing up with just him, that's got to be tough. That one he didn't file. That one he held on to. Not because it made him want to do something, but because it told him exactly who Ryan Whitmore was at his center. Ryan wasn't just arrogant. Ryan was the kind of person who targeted people's most vulnerable thing, not because he was evil necessarily, but because he was the kind of person who'd never been made to understand consequences. Because someone, probably a father with a checkbook and a habit of making problems disappear, had raised him to believe that there were no real consequences for someone like him. That was a dangerous thing to believe. Ethan knew that from experience, because he had spent 15 years being sent in after people who believed the same thing. The escalation, when it came, arrived from a direction Ethan hadn't quite anticipated. It wasn't Ryan who pushed it over the edge. It was Victor. Victor Whitmore arrived on a Saturday morning in a silver Mercedes that probably cost more than Ethan's house. He was a big man, not athletic exactly, but substantial. The way successful men sometimes get when the world stops pushing back against them. Well-dressed, graying at the temples. The kind of face that said, "I've won arguments you haven't started yet." Ryan came out to greet him, and the two of them stood in the driveway, doing that father-son thing, where you can see the entire history of the relationship in one handshake. The slight stiffness, the performance of ease, the way Ryan stood just a little bit differently, trying to look capable. Ethan was on his porch, coffee in hand. Victor noticed him, made deliberate eye contact, didn't nod. Ethan took a sip of coffee. An hour later, there was a knock at his door. He opened it. Victor Whitmore stood on his porch alone, hands in the pockets of his khakis, wearing a reasonable smile that didn't touch his eyes. "Ethan Walker," Victor said, like he was confirming information. "Victor Whitmore," Ethan said. A brief pause as Victor registered the fact that Ethan already knew his name. "I wanted to come introduce myself," Victor said. "Get off on the right foot. I understand there's been a little friction between you and Ryan." "Has there?" Ethan said, not a question. "Ryan's young," Victor said in the tone of a man explaining something he didn't particularly believe required explanation. "He's passionate. He doesn't always look he's a good kid. He just needs to figure out the social dynamics. I'm sure you understand." "I understand that your son stood in front of my 15-year-old daughter and mocked her father to his friends," Ethan said. "Is that the friction you're referring to?" Victor's smile flickered. Like I said. He's young, Ethan said. I know, you said. A longer silence. Victor studied him. Re-evaluated something. The reasonable smile approach wasn't landing the way it usually landed, and Ethan could see Victor noticing that adjusting, reaching for a different key. Look, Victor said, slightly dropping the diplomatic register. I know my son can come across as Mr. Whitmore, Ethan said. I don't have any interest in a conflict with you or your son. I genuinely don't. What I have an interest in is my daughter not being targeted by your son as a way of establishing dominance over this neighborhood. That's the whole conversation. There's nothing else. Victor stared at him. Targeted, he repeated with the careful enunciation of a man buying time to decide whether he was insulted. That's a strong word. It's an accurate word, Ethan said. And I think we both know it. Another long beat. Something shifted in Victor's expression. The reasonable neighbor mask was still in place, but behind it, something recalibrated, some internal calculation, the kind that men like Victor Whitmore made all the time, measuring angles and leverage. I'll talk to him, Victor said finally. I appreciate that, Ethan said. Victor nodded, once the nod of a man who was ending a conversation he hadn't expected to lose, and turned and walked back across the yard. Ethan watched him go. He didn't feel good about what had just happened. He felt the particular kind of alert that came when a situation had been temporarily managed but not resolved. Victor hadn't left as a man who'd heard a reasonable concern. Victor had left as a man who'd been parried and was already thinking about his next move. Ethan went inside. He started making lunch. He was cutting tomatoes when he heard very faintly Victor's voice through the open kitchen window, talking to Ryan in the driveway. He could only hear fragments. Careful, son. More than he looks. And Ryan's voice, lower, confident, in the way that young men are confident in front of their fathers. Dad, come on. He's nothing. Ethan set down the knife. He stood there for a moment. Then he picked the knife back up and kept cutting. He's nothing. He stored that away. Not as an insult, as information. 3 days later, Ryan blocked Ethan's driveway completely. Not half-blocking, fully. The Challenger parked dead-centered behind the truck bumper, touching bumper, with a precision that said it wasn't accidental. Ethan stood in his driveway at 7:20 in the morning, with Lily's school bag over one shoulder, his coffee in hand, looking at the car. Lily came out behind him, saw the car and said, seriously. Go back inside, Ethan said. I'll drive you in a minute. She hesitated. Go ahead, he said, and she went. He walked to Ryan's front door and knocked. 30 seconds, a minute. He could hear movement inside. He knocked again. The door opened. Ryan was in sweatpants, shirtless, holding his phone, looking like he'd been awake for an hour. He looked at Ethan with the expression of a man who had been expecting this and was pleased it was happening. Hey, Ryan said. Move your car, Ethan said. I didn't realize I was blocking you, Ryan said. The performance of innocence was almost casual, like he wasn't even trying hard. Move your car, please, Ethan said. Ryan scratched the back of his head. Yeah, I'll get to it. I've got to finish something first. Give me Ryan. Something in the single word. Not a threat, not a shout. Just his name delivered with a specific kind of finality that made Ryan stop talking. A very long beat. Give me a sec, Ryan said. But his voice had changed slightly. The performance had slipped a half step. Thank you, Ethan said. He turned and walked back to his driveway. 4 minutes later, the Challenger moved. Ethan drove Lily to school. What did you say to him? She asked, looking out the window. I said please, Ethan said. She looked at him sideways. Just please. And thank you, he said. She didn't laugh. She chewed her lip for a second, looking at him. Dad, are you okay? I'm fine, Lil. You don't... She stopped. You seem like you're thinking very hard about something. I always think very hard. You know what I mean. He glanced at her. She was looking at him with those eyes that had always, even when she was 4 years old, seemed to see further into him than they had any right to. Her mother's eyes. He felt the old grief move through him, brief and familiar and quiet. "I'm fine," he said. "I promise." She looked at him a moment longer. Then she said, "Okay," and turned back to the window. The rest of the drive was quiet. That afternoon, Ryan Whitmore's friends gathered in the backyard for what appeared to be a training session. Shirtless, loud, throwing each other around on the mat Ryan had set up under a canopy. Legitimate training. Ethan could see the technique, see that these weren't just guys roughhousing. Ryan was the best of them. Fast, strong, spatially aware. He had the footwork of someone who'd put in real time. Ethan watched from his kitchen window for about 4 minutes. He felt nothing that could be called fear. What he felt was something more complicated. He felt a kind of recognition, not of Ryan as a threat exactly, but of the situation as something that was moving toward a specific point of no return. Ryan was building toward something. The blocking of the driveway had been a test. The comments about Lily had been a test. Everything was a test because Ryan needed to know where Ethan's limit was, and Ryan's entire framework for dealing with the world was predicated on finding that limit and pushing past it. I was going to keep pushing. Ethan had seen this pattern before, in different contexts with much higher stakes. He'd seen it in young men who'd never encountered something they couldn't overcome, who'd pushed and pushed until one day they pushed something that didn't move and they didn't know what to do with that. Some of them learned. Some of them escalated past the point where learning was possible. He didn't know yet which kind Ryan was. He hoped genuinely for the first kind, because the alternative, the scenario where this continued escalating, was something Ethan did not want for himself, for Lily, or in some way he couldn't fully articulate even for Ryan. He turned away from the window. He started Lily's homework review for the night. Outside, Ryan laughed at something one of his friends said, loud and confident and completely certain that he was the most formidable thing on this street. "He's nothing," he had told his father. The quietest man on the block closed his eyes for a moment. Then he opened them and went back to work. 3 days after the driveway incident, Ethan found a scratch on his truck. Not a long scratch. Not the kind that happens when someone opens a car door carelessly in a parking lot. This was deliberate, short, decisive, right along the driver's side door, at exactly the height a key held in a closed fist would travel if someone walked past without slowing down. Ethan stood there in his driveway at 6 in the morning looking at it. He ran one finger along the groove. Then he went inside, made Lily's breakfast, and said nothing. But something shifted in him that morning. Something that had been patient and measured and strategic started to sharpen into something else. Not rage. Ethan had made peace with rage a long time ago. He'd learned in training that rage was just adrenaline with no direction, and adrenaline with no direction got people killed. What sharpened in him was something colder, more deliberate. The thing that happened when a situation stopped being a nuisance and started being a calculation. Someone had made a decision. A small decision, a petty one, but a decision nonetheless. And decisions told you things about the person who made them. He thought about that all morning. By noon, he was certain of 2 things. First, Ryan had done it. Second, Ryan had done it because Victor's visit hadn't gone the way Ryan expected. Victor had come back home from that conversation without a story about how he'd put the neighbor in his place, and Ryan had interpreted Ethan's calm as disrespect, as Ethan refusing to be afraid, which in Ryan's world was the same as Ethan declaring war. The scratch was Ryan's response. Petty enough to deny. Personal enough to mean something. Ethan understood the language. He just wasn't going to respond in it. He called a friend instead, a former teammate named Marcus, who now ran a small auto body shop outside Denver, and asked him to come take a look. Marcus came on Saturday, spent 40 minutes on it, and left without charging anything. "Who did this?" Marcus asked, running his hand along the repair. "Neighbor's kid," Ethan said. Marcus looked at him steadily. Marcus was one of the only people in Ethan's life who knew the full shape of his history, not because Ethan had told him, but because they had been in certain situations together where the shape of a man becomes impossible to hide. He looked at Ethan the way people look at each other when they've both stood in the same fire. "You need help," Marcus said, quietly, with a very specific meaning. "No," Ethan said, just as quietly. Marcus nodded once. "Okay. But thank you," Ethan said. Marcus bumped his shoulder on the way to his truck. Call me if that changes. He drove away. Ethan stood in his driveway for a moment, looking at the space where the scratch had been. Gone. Like it never happened. That was the thing about certain kinds of damage. You could repair the surface, and nobody would ever know. But the person who caused it, they always knew. And they always watched for your reaction. Ethan went inside and started dinner. I was going to let Ryan watch and see nothing. That was its own kind of response. That night at dinner, Lily said, Sophie's mom asked me if everything was okay at home. Ethan looked up from his plate. What do you mean? She said Ryan told someone in the neighborhood that you and him had some kind of argument, that you came to his door and threatened him. Lily kept her eyes on her food, but her voice had that careful quality she used when she was testing how much weight a floor could hold before she stepped on it. She said she was asking because she cares, but I don't know. She seemed weird about it. Ethan set down his fork. I thought about that for a moment. The information moved through him, the shape of it, what it meant, what it was designed to do. Ryan was building a narrative. Before any real confrontation happened, he was laying the groundwork, establishing in the social fabric of the neighborhood that Ethan was the aggressor, that Ryan was the reasonable one. The young guy just trying to get along who kept running into this difficult, aggressive neighbor. It was exactly what Ethan would have expected from someone who'd grown up watching his father manage conflicts through perception management and social leverage. Smart in a narrow way, dangerous in a larger one. What did you tell Sophie's mom? He said. I said everything was fine, Lily said, because I didn't know what else to say. She paused. Dad, is everything fine? He looked at her. There was a version of this moment where he told her everything was absolutely fine and let her believe it. There was another version where he explained the whole situation and worried her unnecessarily. Neither of those was right. He'd learned in 3 years of raising her alone that teenagers had very accurate internal lie detectors, and the fastest way to lose a kid's trust was to underestimate their ability to handle truth. It's not a crisis, he said. But no, it's not nothing either. Ryan is trying to make himself look like the good guy before anything serious happens, so that when something does happen, people already have a version of events that makes him look reasonable. Lily stared at him. That's really calculated. Yes, he said, for a 20-year-old. He had a good teacher, Ethan said, thinking of Victor. Lily absorbed this. She was quiet for a minute, the way she went quiet when she was processing something, not withdrawing, just thinking, which was a thing he had always loved about her. What are you going to do? She said. Nothing right now, he said. She looked at him with those eyes. Dad. I mean it, he said. Right now the best thing I can do is nothing. If I react, I play into his story. If I stay calm, I make his story harder to tell. She thought about that. That sounds really hard. It is, he said, and he smiled at her, a real one. But I've done harder things. She smiled back just barely and reached over and stole a piece of his bread. And just like that, the weight of the conversation lifted a half step. They did the dishes together. She told him about something funny that had happened in chemistry. He listened and laughed at the right places and felt, even in the middle of everything, the particular gratitude that he always felt for these small, ordinary moments. Because he knew in a way that most people fortunately never had to learn exactly how fragile ordinary was. He was still thinking about Ryan's narrative campaign when he turned off the kitchen light. I was going to have to do something about it. Not much, not dramatically, but something. He just needed to figure out what. The answer came to him unexpectedly 2 days later. At the mailbox. I was collecting the mail on a Tuesday morning when Linda Okafor from 3 houses down walked by with her dog, an enormous golden retriever named Biscuit, who approached every human being on earth with the same unbridled enthusiasm, as if every person was specifically the person he'd been waiting his whole life to meet. Biscuit immediately put his entire enormous head into Ethan's hip, and Ethan scratched his ears. Sorry, Linda said, pulling the leash slightly. He has no personal boundaries. Neither did most of my teammates, Ethan said. I don't mind. Linda laughed. She was in her mid-60s, retired sharp in the way that people who've been paying attention their whole lives get sharp. She'd lived on this street for 22 years. She knew everything. She glanced toward Ryan's house. "You know," she said carefully, "I heard some things." "I heard you might have," Ethan said. She looked at him directly. "The things I heard don't match what I see when I watch you. And I've been watching people on this street for a long time." He held her gaze. "I appreciate that, Linda." "Ryan's charming," she said. "His father's more charming. I've met men like that before. My late husband used to say, be careful of people who spend a lot of energy making sure everyone likes them. That's usually not about connection. That's about control." "Your husband was a smart man," Ethan said. "He was." A brief flash of something in her eyes, grief and pride in the same instant. "You have anything you want me to know? Anything that would help me understand the real picture?" He thought about it. "Ryan scratched my truck," he said. "I can't prove it. I'm not asking you to believe it or do anything about it. I just wanted you to know it happened." Linda looked at him for a long moment. "Okay," she said. "Thank you for telling me." Biscuit made a sound of profound disappointment when Ethan stopped scratching his ears. "Good dog," Ethan told him. He went inside. He had no idea what Linda would do with that information. Maybe nothing. But he had put one true data point into the neighborhood's social system quietly and without drama, and that was enough for now. 2 hours later, he was on a video call with a cybersecurity client when he heard it. A crash. From outside. Then laughter. He ended the call with an apology pushed back from his desk and walked to the front door. Ryan and 2 of his friends were in the street, and Ethan's trash cans, which he'd put out that morning for pickup, were on their sides, contents scattered across the driveway and part of the sidewalk. One of Ryan's friends was holding his phone up, recording, laughing so hard he could barely hold the camera steady. Ryan was grinning. "Oops," he said, looking directly at Ethan. Ethan stepped off the porch. He walked to the first trash can, picked it up, set it upright, started collecting what had spilled methodically without looking at Ryan. "You're not going to say anything," Ryan said. Ethan picked up a plastic bottle, placed it in the can. "Come on, man, we're just having fun." Ryan spread his hands. "It was an accident." Ethan picked up a flattened cardboard box, folded it, set it in the can. "Say something," Ryan said. And the grin had slipped a degree because this was not the reaction he'd planned for. He'd planned for anger, for confrontation. For a moment his friend could film and edit and post somewhere with a funny caption. He had not planned for silence. For methodical, complete, utter silence. Ethan picked up the second can, set it upright, continued. "This is embarrassing," one of Ryan's friends muttered. But he was saying it to Ryan, not to Ethan. Ryan's jaw tightened. "Hey," he said, and his voice had changed. The grin was gone now. "I'm talking to you." Ethan picked up the last piece of trash, looked at it for a half second, set it in the can. Then he looked at Ryan. Just looked. He didn't say a word. Ryan stared back. And for the second time since they'd become neighbors, Ethan watched that thing happen in Ryan's eyes, that flicker of something beneath the surface, some recognition that had no name in Ryan's vocabulary, some signal his body sent that his conscious mind immediately overrode. "You're a freak," Ryan said, but his voice was slightly uneven. Ethan turned and walked back inside. He sat back down at his desk, re-established the video call with the client, apologized again, said it was a neighbor situation. Everything was handled. The client, a man in his 50s who'd worked with Ethan for 2 years, said, "Is it really handled?" with the kind of tone that suggested he was asking about something larger than a video call interruption. "It's handled," Ethan said. "It wasn't handled, but he was handling it. There's a difference." On Friday of that same week, Lily came home from school quiet, in a way that was different from her usual quiet. She dropped her bag by the door, went to the kitchen, poured herself a glass of water, and stood at the counter drinking it with both hands wrapped around the glass like she was cold. Ethan watched her from the hallway. "Tell me," he said. She set the glass down, turned around. Her eyes were dry, which in his experience meant the hurt was deep enough that she'd moved past the point where crying helped. "Ryan's been talking to people at school," she said. He went still. "He knows some older kids, from his gym. One of them goes to Jefferson, that's the high school on the other side of the district, and apparently Ryan's been telling people that you're—" She stopped, swallowed. "He's been saying that you're unstable, that you have PTSD and you're dangerous, that the military messed you up and you're not okay, and living next to you is scary." The silence in the kitchen was very complete. Ethan stood in it. He processed each word carefully. Not for accuracy, he already knew exactly what Ryan was doing and why. He processed them for their impact on Lily, because that was what mattered. That was the only thing that mattered. "And," he said quietly, "and kids at school know I'm your daughter. And some of them were saying it was just whispers, but I heard it saying like, 'Is she okay? Is she safe at home?'" Lily's voice stayed controlled the whole time, and that control cost her something. He could see it. "And Sophie said something to me, and I don't think she meant it badly, but she said, 'Lily, if you ever need anything, you can always call me,' like I was someone who needed rescuing." He crossed the kitchen. He put his hands on her shoulders. She looked up at him, and the control in her eyes cracked just a fraction. "I hate this," she said. "I know," he said. "It's not true. I know. You're not." She stopped, started again. "You're the safest person I've ever known. You've never once—" "Lily." He said her name the way he always said it when she needed to stop talking and just hear him. "Listen to me. What Ryan is doing is exactly what cowards do when they can't win a real fight. They try to rewrite the story. They try to make other people see what they want them to see. It doesn't have anything to do with truth, and it doesn't have anything to do with you." She breathed. "Then why does it feel like it does?" "Because you love me," he said. "And someone is lying about someone you love. That's supposed to hurt. That means you're paying attention." She was quiet. "Are you, Dad? Are you okay? Like really? Because you've been—" She looked at him carefully. "You've been very quiet. Like more quiet than usual. And you look like—" "Like what?" She thought about it. "Like you're waiting for something." He looked at her for a long moment. "I'm fine," he said. She searched his face. She was 15 years old, and she could read him better than anyone he had ever met. And he watched her work through what she saw and make a decision about what to do with it. "Okay," she said finally. But it was a different kind of okay than the one in the car. This one meant, "I trust you, but I'm watching." "Good," he said. He released her shoulders. "Go do your homework. I'll make dinner in an hour." She picked up her bag and went to her room. He stood in the kitchen for a moment alone. Something was building. He could feel it the way he used to feel weather changing in the mountains, not through any single sense, but through some integration of everything at once. Pressure, temperature, the way sound traveled. You developed it after enough time in the field, this sense that the environment was shifting toward something. He wasn't afraid. He was ready, but he still hadn't figured out exactly what he was ready for, or when it would come. He found out 6 days later. It was the Saturday of the Summer Neighborhood Festival, an annual thing the street had been doing for 12 years, according to Linda. Barbecue, lawn games, families, the whole picture. Ethan had attended the previous two and liked them in a muted way. He was not a social animal by nature, but he understood the value of community and made himself show up. He'd planned to go this year with Lily, eat some food, talk to Linda, and a couple of the other neighbors he actually liked, and leave by 4. Ryan, he discovered when they arrived, had spent the week recruiting. It was immediately visible. Ryan had brought 6 of his training friends, big physical, with that particular energy of young men who were expecting something exciting to happen. They set up on one side of the street with their own chairs, their own speakers, their own cooler, and they took up space the way people take up space when they want everyone to know they're taking up space. Ethan and Lily arrived and found spots near Linda and a couple named Dave and Patrice from down the block. Dave immediately handed Ethan a soda, and Patrice immediately hugged Lily, and for the first hour, everything felt almost normal. Ethan ate a burger. He talked to Dave about the Rockies. He watched Lily and Maya throw a frisbee with Priya and someone's younger sibling. He kept Ryan in his peripheral vision, the way he kept everything in his peripheral vision, not staring, not tracking, just maintaining general awareness, the way you always did in unfamiliar terrain. Ryan kept glancing over. His friends kept glancing over. Something was building, and Ethan could feel it accumulating the way static accumulates before lightning. But he stayed where he was. He stayed calm. He had one soda, and then another. He laughed at something Dave said. He was present, fully and deliberately present, because presence was its own statement. Then Ryan stood up. He picked up his phone, made a call, said something short and quiet. Ethan watched him in his peripheral vision. 3 minutes later, a car pulled up, and Victor Whitmore got out. And Ethan understood. This had been planned. The festival, the friends, the father. All of it arranged in advance. Ryan hadn't decided this morning to pick a fight. Ryan had set this up days ago, had assembled his audience, had made sure his father was here as both witness and insurance. Ethan set down his soda. Dave was still talking about the Rockies. Ethan said, "Dave, give me just a second," and stood up. Ryan walked toward the center of the street, and his friends spread out slightly behind him, and Victor stood near the curb with his arms crossed and his face arranged into something that was trying to be neutral but was actually anticipatory. "Ethan," Ryan called out. The conversation around them didn't stop immediately. It dimmed. Then, as people picked up the tone, it stopped. Lily's head came up fast. Ryan stopped 10 feet away. He was wearing a short-sleeved shirt, and his arms were right there, the size of them. The definition, the visible advertisement of months of dedicated training. He was built to be intimidating, and he knew it, and he held himself in a way that made sure everyone looking at him knew it too. "We've got a problem," Ryan said, loud enough for the whole street to hear. "No," Ethan said quietly. "We don't." "I think we do," Ryan said. "I think you've had a problem with me since day one. I think you've been talking to people about me, making me look bad, trying to turn the neighborhood against me." He paused, looking around, making sure everyone was watching. "So let's just settle it." "Ryan," Victor's voice from the curb. Not warning, approving. "There's nothing to settle," Ethan said. "Really?" Ryan took 2 steps closer. "Because I've been real patient with you, neighbor. I've let a lot of things slide. But you went to people. You talked about me. You embarrassed me in front of this street." He spread his hands. "So I'm giving you a chance. Right here, right now. Like men." Ethan heard Lily make a sound behind him, not a word, just a breath, sharp and small. He did not look at her. He kept his eyes on Ryan. "Walk away," Ethan said. "No," Ryan said. "I'm done walking away." He took another step. "You want everyone to think you're so calm, so reasonable, the quiet dad, the good neighbor." A short, contemptuous sound. "I'm calling it. Right now. In front of everyone. You're scared. You've always been scared. And I'm done pretending otherwise." The street was completely silent. Victor watched. Ryan's friends watched. Linda watched from her chair with an expression Ethan couldn't read. Lily took a step forward. "Don't," Ethan said without turning, and she stopped. He looked at Ryan, and he tried one final time. "Ryan," he said, "I'm going to say this once. Walk away. I don't want this. You don't want this. Whatever you think this is going to be, you're wrong. Walk away." Ryan heard the words. Ethan could see him hear them. Could see in that fraction of a second before ego and pride and performance took over, could see Ryan actually consider it the smallest, briefest consideration, a door that stood open for 1/2 second before everything Ryan had been built to be slammed it shut. "Fight me," Ryan said, and he pushed Ethan in the chest. Not a punch, not a grab. A push hard enough to mean something calculated to provoke with enough force to rock Ethan back 1/2 step. The crowd reacted with a collective inhale. Ethan looked down at his chest, then up at Ryan. Something left his face. Not anger. Not calculation. Not the warmth he always tried to maintain, the civilian ease he'd spent 3 years constructing and wearing like a coat. What left was everything that wasn't essential. And what remained was something that had no name in a neighborhood context, something that existed only in very specific environments, something that Ryan had never been in proximity to before and could not name, and therefore could not prepare for. Ryan saw it. And for the first time since they'd become neighbors, the arrogance in his eyes cracked. Not broke. Cracked. Just enough for something else to show through. Ryan threw the first punch. Fast. Hard. The kind of strike that had probably dropped every sparring partner in his gym at least once. It came from the right angle for Ethan's jaw, thrown with the full weight of 20 years old and 200 pounds and a lifetime of training behind it. It didn't land. Ethan was no longer where it was aimed. He had moved, not dramatically, not with any wasted motion, just a slight pivot and a half step back, and the punch went past him in the empty air where his face had been, and Ryan stumbled forward an inch with the momentum. Ryan recovered instantly. He was good. He threw again, a combination this time, jab and cross, then a clinch attempt, and Ethan read all three before they arrived and moved through them like they were happening in slow motion. The crowd was absolutely silent. Ryan tried a takedown, dropped his level, drove forward, arms wrapping for the legs. Ethan sprawled back, denied it, used Ryan's momentum to guide him sideways, and Ryan went to one knee on the pavement. He came back up immediately, breathing harder, eyes different now. The performance was gone, the showmanship was gone. What was in his eyes now was actual, real, unfiltered alarm. Because he was good, he was genuinely good, and the man in front of him was doing to him what he had never had done to him, which was nothing. Ethan wasn't attacking. He wasn't countering. He was simply making Ryan miss over and over with a precision and an ease that had only one explanation, and Ryan's brain was starting to arrive at that explanation and not like what it found. Ryan came again, harder, faster, desperation beginning to sharpen his technique even as it undermined his composure. Ethan let him close the distance. Let him get an arm around his neck, a rear clinch attempt strong with real leverage. Then Ethan did something. It was fast, and it was controlled, and it was over in approximately 2 seconds. And when it was finished, Ryan was on the ground on his back, and Ethan was standing upright above him, and Ryan was looking up at the sky and breathing hard and not immediately moving. Victor took a step forward from the curb. Don't, Linda said, clearly, to Victor. Victor stopped. Ryan sat up slowly. He put one hand on the ground. He sat there in the middle of the street in front of everyone, and he looked up at Ethan. And the expression on his face had changed completely. It wasn't anger anymore. It wasn't arrogance. It wasn't the performance. It was something much younger and much more raw. It was shock. Ethan crouched down to his level. He spoke quietly enough that the words were only for Ryan. I served 15 years, he said. I've been in places that would end you in 30 seconds. I have never once wanted to hurt you. I'm not going to hurt you now. He paused. Get up. Go home. Think about what you actually want your life to be. Ryan stared at him. Ethan stood up. He turned and walked back to where Lily was standing. Her face was doing something complicated. Shock relief. Something that might have been pride, and underneath all of it, the look of someone who had just seen something she had half known for a long time and was now dealing with the full weight of knowing it completely. Dad, she said. I know, he said. You're... She stopped. He put his arm around her shoulders. Let's get some food, he said. I didn't finish my burger. Behind them, nobody spoke for a long moment. Then slowly, the festival found its breath again. Nobody moved for a long time after Ethan walked away. The festival held its breath. The food sat untouched. The frisbees stayed on the ground. And Ryan Whitmore sat in the middle of the street in front of 40 people and stared at the pavement like it owed him an explanation. Victor was the first to move. He crossed the street in 6 fast strides and crouched down next to his son. Ethan didn't watch it happen. He was back at the folding table with his arm around Lily's shoulders, and he was deliberately not watching, but he heard it. The low, urgent murmur of Victor's voice. The silence where Ryan's response should have been. Dave pressed another soda into Ethan's hand without a word. Patrice had her hand on Lily's arm. Linda was watching Victor with an expression that could have cut glass. You okay? Dave said quietly. Yes, Ethan said. I mean really. I know what you mean, Ethan said. And yes. Two of Ryan's training friends helped him to his feet. He stood up straight, which took visible effort not because he was injured. Ethan had been very careful about that, but because the weight of what had just happened was physical in its own way. Ryan stood up and looked across the street at Ethan's back, and Ethan felt it without seeing it. That particular sensation of being looked at with a specific kind of attention, the kind that was trying to understand something it had never had to understand before. Ryan said something to his father. Victor said something back. Sharp. Brief. Then Ryan turned and walked to his house. His friends followed. The festival slowly, and with the careful collective awkwardness of people who have witnessed something they don't have a framework for, began breathing again. Conversation started up. Someone turned music back on. A child ran across the yard, chasing something. Normal life reasserted itself the way it always did. Tentatively at first, then, with increasing conviction, until you could almost believe nothing had happened. Almost. Ethan felt Lily looking at him. I'm fine, he said, before she could ask. I know, she said. I wasn't going to ask that. What were you going to ask? She was quiet for a moment. What happens now? He didn't answer right away, because it was a good question, and it deserved a real answer rather than a reassuring one, and he wasn't sure yet what the real answer was. Now, he said, we find out what kind of person Ryan Whitmore actually is. She looked at him. You don't think it's over? I know it's not over, he said. Victor Whitmore doesn't lose gracefully. He never has. We'll hear from him again. He was right. They heard from him that same night. The call came at 9:15 p.m. Ethan was in the living room with a book he wasn't reading when his phone buzzed on the coffee table. Unknown number. He picked up. Mr. Walker. Victor's voice. Flat. The reasonable businessman register was completely gone. We need to discuss what happened today. We do, Ethan agreed. My son could have been seriously hurt. Your son pushed me in the chest and threw the first punch, Ethan said, in front of 40 witnesses, several of whom were recording on their phones. Is that the event you'd like to discuss? A long pause. You're very calm, Victor said. Yes, Ethan said. That's either very confident or very stupid. Which do you think? Ethan said. Another pause. Longer this time. Ethan could hear Victor reassembling his approach in real time, the sound of a man who was accustomed to controlling conversations, discovering that his usual tools weren't fitting this particular situation. I'm going to be honest with you, Victor said. And the register changed again, lower, less formal, something that was either genuine or a very good performance of genuine. I don't know what I expected today. I thought Ryan told me you were... He made it sound like you were someone who needed to be put in his place, someone who'd been making his life difficult for no reason. And now, Ethan said, now I'm looking at a video on my phone that 3 different people sent me in the last hour, Victor said. And I'm looking at my son getting systematically dismantled by a man in jeans and a t-shirt who didn't throw a single offensive strike. A beat. Who are you? I'm your neighbor, Ethan said. That's not what I'm asking. Ethan considered what to say. He decided on the truth because the truth was going to come out anyway, and it was cleaner to be the one who delivered it. I served 15 years as a Navy SEAL reconnaissance specialist, he said. I retired 3 years ago. I work in cybersecurity now. I have a 15-year-old daughter. That's who I am. The silence on Victor's end was different from before. Denser. The silence of someone recalibrating an entire framework. Ryan didn't know that, Victor said. No, Ethan said. Did you know that he didn't know? Yes, Ethan said. Another long pause. Why didn't you tell him it might have prevented? Because it shouldn't have been necessary, Ethan said. And there was something in his voice now, not anger, but weight. The weight of 15 years and every lesson inside them. A man's past isn't his permission slip. Ryan didn't need to know I was a SEAL to understand he shouldn't harass my daughter. He didn't need a threat to understand basic human decency. That's the problem, Mr. Whitmore. Not what happened today. What happened today was just the end of a story that started the moment your son decided my quiet was weakness. Victor said nothing. I'm going to hang up now, Ethan said. I'm not pressing charges. What happened today was self-defense and everyone present knows it. But if your son comes near my daughter again, if this continues in any form, I will pursue every legal avenue available to me, and I will not be quiet about it. Do you understand? Yes, Victor said, very quietly. Good night, Mr. Whitmore, Ethan said. He ended the call. He sat with the phone in his hand for a moment. The house was quiet. Lily was in her room with her door closed and her light on. Outside, the neighborhood had gone to sleep around the events of the afternoon, like water flowing around a stone, acknowledging them by going around them, not by stopping. He put the phone down. He picked up his book. He read 2 pages and absorbed nothing. Then he set the book down and sat with his thoughts because some things needed to be sat with. He thought about Ryan's face when he'd crouched down. That expression. The shock, yes, but under it, something else, something younger than anything Ryan had shown since he'd moved in. Something that looked, if Ethan was being honest, a lot like a kid who had finally been told the truth about something he'd always half known. He thought about what Ryan had built for himself. The image, the training, the expensive house, the loud friends. All of it constructed in service of one idea, that strength was the thing that made you matter. That if you were the strongest thing in the room, nothing could touch you. It was a simple idea, and it was wrong, and it was also, he had to admit, an understandable one, especially for a 20-year-old with a father who'd solved every problem with money and influence, who'd never let Ryan develop the muscle that only grows when you're actually allowed to fail. Victor Whitmore, for all his wealth, had given his son something genuinely dangerous, an untested certainty. Ethan knew what happened to untested certainties in the real world. He'd watched it happen in situations where the stakes were much higher than a neighborhood confrontation. Sometimes they shattered in ways that couldn't be put back together. He hoped that wasn't what happened to Ryan. He turned off the light at 10:30. He lay in the dark and listened to the house breathe and thought about the thing Victor had said on the phone. That register at the end, low or less controlled. The question, genuine or performed. Who are you? He thought about that question for a long time. He fell asleep. He woke at 4:47. He ran 4 miles. The neighborhood was the same as always, in the dark, silent still. Colorado air, sharp and clean, and completely indifferent to the events of the previous day. He ran the same route, same pace. His body moved with the automatic ease of 10,000 previous mornings, and he let his mind run ahead of him processing previous day. He ran the same route, same pace. His body moved with the automatic ease of 10,000 previous mornings, and he let his mind run ahead of him processing. By the time he got back to the house, he'd reached a conclusion. This was not over. Not because of Ryan. Ryan, he believed, had reached some kind of turning point. Something had cracked in the confrontation, and he didn't think Ryan was stupid enough to try to push back through it. What wasn't over was Victor. Victor was a problem solver, and right now, Ethan was a problem. And men like Victor didn't let problems sit. They investigated them. They found leverage. They built strategies. He was going to need to be ready for whatever that looked like. Hal was in the kitchen making coffee when his phone buzzed again. A text this time, not a call. The number was unfamiliar, not Victor's number from the night before. He opened it. The text said, "You should know they're asking about you. Someone filed a records request. Former military. J." He stared at it for a moment. J was Jameson. Colonel Jameson Reeves, retired, who now sat on the board of a veterans advocacy organization in D.C., and had more connections in more places than anyone Ethan had ever met. They had served adjacent tours in the same theater, and crossed paths enough times that a friendship of the particular kind, low maintenance, high trust, had taken root and stayed. Jamison had contacts everywhere, including apparently wherever it was that private investigators filed certain kinds of requests. Ethan typed back. How serious. The response came in under a minute. Full background. Military records, sealed commendations, financials. Someone with money behind it. Victor. Moving fast. Ethan had to give him credit. Within 16 hours of the confrontation, Victor had already deployed resources. He typed, "Okay. Thank you." Jamison's reply, "Anything you need you call. Clear, clear." Ethan typed, "Give my best to Helen." He put the phone face down on the counter and drank his coffee. I thought about what a full background investigation into his military record would find. The short answer was more than Victor was expecting. The longer answer was more complicated. His record contained things that were publicly accessible and impressive. It also contained things that were not publicly accessible and were significantly more than impressive. Classified missions citations, with details redacted commendations, signed by people whose names couldn't appear in any document without triggering security protocols. What Victor's investigator was going to find was not the picture of a broken, struggling veteran that Ryan's narrative had painted. What they were going to find was something that would require a complete rethinking of the entire situation. He almost felt sorry for Victor. Almost. 3 days passed. They were unusual days, tense, in a way that had no visible source, like the feeling before a thunderstorm when the sky is still technically clear. Ryan's house was quiet. The Challenger and the Porsche stayed in the driveway. The training friends didn't come. The music stayed off. Lily noticed. "He hasn't come outside once," she said on the second evening, looking out the kitchen window while she dried dishes. "I know," Ethan said. "Is that good or bad?" "I don't know yet." She handed him a plate to put away. "Are you worried?" He thought about that honestly. "Not worried," he said. "Alert." "What's the difference?" "Worried is emotion," he said. "Alert is information. Worried makes you reactive. Alert makes you ready." She considered that while she dried the next plate. "Is that a SEAL thing?" "It's a survival thing," he said. "You can use it for anything. Tests, job interviews." She gave him a sideways look. "Did you just try to turn this into a life lesson?" "Did it work?" "Little bit," she admitted. He put the plate away and allowed himself a small moment of satisfaction. The ordinary domesticity of it dishes conversation. Her voice in his kitchen felt more valuable to him in that moment than it had any right to. He knew that was partly because of how close the past weeks had come to contaminating it. To turning this house into a place where Lily didn't feel safe. He felt a cold, clean anger about that, not at Ryan exactly, but at the situation. At the casual carelessness with which some people walked into other people's lives and stirred things up without ever considering what those lives actually contained. On the fourth day, Victor Whitmore came back. Ethan was on his front porch with coffee at 8 a.m. when the silver Mercedes pulled up. Victor got out. He was dressed differently than before, less deliberately, less armored. Dark slacks, a collared shirt, no tie. He looked like a man who'd had a hard few days. He stopped at the edge of Ethan's property and looked up at him. "Can I come up?" he said. Ethan studied him for a moment. Then he said, "Yes." Victor came up the porch steps. He didn't ask to sit, and Ethan didn't offer. They stood there both looking out at the street for a long moment before Victor spoke. "My investigator called me yesterday," Victor said. "I know," Ethan said. Victor glanced at him. "You know." "I knew he was looking within hours of you hiring him," Ethan said. "I have connections. That's in the report, by the way. You might want to read that part carefully." Victor was quiet for a moment. "He said the investigator. He said he'd been doing this work for 20 years and he'd never pulled a file that looked like yours." A pause. "He said some of it was classified to a level he couldn't access." "Yes," Ethan said. "He said the parts he could access." Victor stopped. He pressed his mouth together for a moment, and Ethan watched him work through something. Some combination of embarrassment and something that might have been genuine, if belated, respect. He said the word extraordinary 3 times in a 5-minute call, and this man doesn't compliment people. Ethan said nothing. "I owe you an apology," Victor said. "You owe my daughter an apology," Ethan said. "I can handle myself. She's 15. She went to school and heard rumors that her father was dangerous and unstable. She had her friends asking if she needed help. That's what your son did, and you let it happen." Victor took that. He didn't deflect it, which surprised Ethan slightly. He took it the way a man who understood he deserved it takes a hard thing without flinching away, but without pretending it didn't hurt either. "You're right," Victor said. "I knew what Ryan was doing. I thought he was just a short, uncomfortable sound. I thought he was establishing himself, making his mark. I thought that's what young men did, and you just let them do it, and eventually they settle down." "Not all young men," Ethan said. "And not all situations." "No," Victor said. "Not all situations." He turned and looked at Ethan directly for the first time. "What I did coming over here that first time trying to smooth it over, I was protecting him. I was already building the legal defense in my head before anything had even happened. That's what I do. That's what I've always done for him." He paused. "I think that might be the problem." It was the most honest thing Ethan had ever heard from him. "Yes," Ethan said. "It might be." Victor nodded slowly. He looked back at the street. "Ryan hasn't left his house since Saturday," he said. "He's not returning calls from his gym. He won't talk to me, not really. I get one-word answers." He paused. I don't know what he is. Embarrassed isn't the right word. It's more than that." "Shaken," Ethan said. Victor looked at him. "Yes, that's the word." "Good," Ethan said. Victor blinked. He'd clearly expected something softer. "I mean that in the best possible way," Ethan said. "Shaken is the beginning of recalibration. It means something real got through. Whether he does something useful with it is up to him." They were quiet for a moment. Then Victor said something that Ethan didn't expect. "Would you—" He stopped. Started again. "This is going to sound strange, but would you be willing to talk to him? Not about what happened. I'm not asking you to make it easy on him. He's not listening to me. He doesn't respect me the way a son should. That's partly my fault, I know that." A long pause. "But he might hear something from you that he can't hear from me." Ethan looked at him for a long time. This was the last thing he had anticipated, and he was very good at anticipating things. "Not now," Ethan said. "And not because I told you to. If Ryan comes to me, if he decides on his own that he wants to talk, I'll listen. But I'm not going to perform a lesson for your benefit. That's not how this works." Victor absorbed that. "Okay," he said. "And Victor." Ethan looked at him steadily. "If anything at all happens that resembles what happened these past 3 weeks, it's over. No conversations, no second chances. The legal process fully immediately. You understand?" "Yes," Victor said. "Good." Victor nodded once. He turned to leave. Then he stopped on the top porch step and turned back and said something without quite looking at Ethan. "The report mentioned something. A mission in 2012. The investigator said the details were fully classified, but that there were commendations from 2 senators and a citation from the Joint Chiefs." He paused. He said normally those things don't happen unless— He stopped again. Didn't finish. Ethan waited. "I just wanted to say," Victor said, and his voice was slightly different now, stripped of its usual professional control. "For whatever it was, thank you." Ethan looked at him. "Go home, Victor," he said. Victor went home. Ethan stood on the porch a long time after the Mercedes disappeared, his coffee, long cold, in his hand. The street was quiet. A few houses over someone's sprinkler had turned on automatically. A bird landed on the fence post and looked at him with the profound indifference that birds had perfected over millions of years. He thought about 2012. He thought about a village in a country whose name he still couldn't say in most contexts. About a team of 6 and a mission that had turned into something else entirely. And about the particular weight of certain decisions made in darkness under pressure with no good options available. I thought about the 3 months after he came home. The sleeplessness. The hypervigilance. The mornings when he drove Lily to school and sat in the parking lot for 20 minutes before he could make himself drive away, because every time he drove away from her, he felt something that he didn't have an adult word for, but that felt like the world ending on a small scale. I thought about the therapist he'd seen for a year. A quiet woman named Dr. Ewan, who had said to him in their 3rd session, "You can be both things, Ethan. You can be the man who did those things in those places, and also the man who makes his daughter's lunch every morning. That's not a contradiction. That's integration. He'd held on to that word. Integration. He was still holding on to it. He went inside, poured the cold coffee down the sink, made a fresh cup, sat at the kitchen table and opened his laptop and did 3 hours of work methodically and thoroughly because work was something he could control. He was deep in a security audit when the knock came. Not at the front door. At the side door, the one that opened onto the narrow strip of yard that ran between his house and Ryan's property line. He almost never used that door. Almost nobody knew it was there. He closed the laptop, walked to the door, opened it. Ryan Whitmore stood on the other side in jeans and a plain gray shirt, without his friends, and without his performance, and without, as far as Ethan could tell, any plan at all. He looked like he hadn't slept well in 4 days. He looked younger than 20, without the armor of arrogance. He looked like what he actually was, a kid who was figuring something out and didn't know how. Ryan opened his mouth, closed it, tried again. "I don't know why I came to this door," he said. "Probably because it felt less official," Ethan said. Ryan looked at him. "Can I?" He stopped, swallowed. "I just wanted to say something, and then I'll go." "Say it," Ethan said. Ryan stood there for a moment, and Ethan watched him fighting with it. Whatever it was, the thing he'd come here to say, the thing that had apparently been sitting in him for 4 days, like something he couldn't digest. "I've been in training for 3 years, Ryan said. "Real training, not messing around. I've fought 23 amateur bouts. I've beaten guys twice my size." He paused. Nobody has ever." He stopped. His jaw worked. "I didn't touch you. I couldn't even." "No," Ethan said quietly. "You couldn't." "Who are you?" Ryan said. And it was his father's question, but from a completely different place, not strategic curiosity, not the calculation of a businessman reassessing an asset. This was raw. This was a 20-year-old who had built his entire identity on being the most dangerous thing in any room, asking the question with genuine and slightly desperate sincerity. Ethan looked at him for a long moment. "Come inside," he said. Ryan blinked. "What?" "I said come inside. I'll make coffee. You can ask your questions, and I'll answer them honestly." He paused. "Or you can stand there. Either way." A long beat. Ryan stepped inside. Ethan made coffee. Ryan sat at the kitchen table looking around the kitchen with the expression of someone recalibrating everything they thought they knew about a space. There were photos on the refrigerator, Lily at 12 at a camping trip, Lily at 8, laughing at something off camera, a photo of Ethan and a group of men in desert gear, whose faces were partially obscured by hats and sunglasses, but whose posture told everything. Ryan stared at the last photo for a long time. Ethan put coffee in front of him, sat down across from him. "Ask," he said. Ryan looked at the photo one more time, then at Ethan. "How long?" he said. 15 years, Ethan said. "Reconnaissance specialist. I was embedded in the kind of environments where if you make one mistake, you don't come home. Every skill I have was built for those environments. Every reflex. Everything you saw on Saturday, that's not gym training. That's 15 years of situations where failure wasn't an option." Ryan absorbed that. His hands were wrapped around the coffee mug. "And you live here. You mow your lawn. You make lunches." He said it without contempt, which was new. He said it with something that sounded like genuine bafflement. How do you just do that?" Ethan looked at him. "Because this," he said, "is what I fought for. Not the missions, not the medals. This, the lawn, the lunches, her." He nodded toward the photos on the refrigerator. "Everything I did over there, every single thing, was so that this could exist. You understand?" Ryan said nothing. But his eyes went to the refrigerator again, to Lily's photo at 12 at the camping trip, laughing at something nobody in the room could see. And something shifted in his face. Not dramatically. Not in a way that would make a good movie moment. Just quietly, the way real things a small rearrangement of understanding, a piece moving to a place it should have been for a long time. "I was an idiot," Ryan said. His voice was flat, direct, no performance in it. Yes, Ethan said. I could have. He stopped. If you'd actually fought back. If you'd wanted to hurt me. Yes, Ethan said again. Ryan stared at the table. He pressed his palms flat against the surface, a gesture Ethan noticed that was almost identical to his own morning habit. Feeling the ground beneath you. Reminding yourself you're here. My dad came to talk to you, Ryan said. This morning, Ethan confirmed. Did he apologize? Ryan said. And there was something sharp under the question, something that was asking not just whether the words were said, but whether they were real. He said some honest things, Ethan said. That's not the same as an apology, but it's a start. Ryan was quiet for a moment. He means well, he said. And then immediately, that sounds like an excuse. It does, Ethan agreed. It's not one, Ryan said. I'm not. He stopped, pressed his palms flatter on the table. I'm not trying to excuse anything. What I said about you to your daughter's school to the neighbors. What I said to her face that first day. He looked up. His eyes were direct in a way they hadn't been before ever. That was wrong, all of it. I knew it was wrong when I was doing it. I just didn't. He struggled. I didn't think there were consequences. For me. I've never had consequences. Ethan finished. Yes, Ryan said. The kitchen was very quiet. Do you want to know something? Ethan said. Ryan looked at him. I thought about walking over to your house the first day I saw you, Ethan said. When you looked at me in my driveway and I saw that smirk, I thought I should go introduce myself, have a conversation. Maybe that's all it takes. He paused. I didn't go. I don't know why exactly. Maybe I was tired. Maybe I was making assumptions of my own. He held Ryan's gaze. The outcome might have been different. Ryan stared at him. Are you saying this is partly your fault? I'm saying situations are almost never entirely one person's fault, Ethan said. And I'm saying I see you right now in this kitchen, and what I see is someone who is capable of understanding a thing when it's put in front of him clearly enough. That matters. Ryan was quiet for a long time. So long that the refrigerator hummed, and the clock on the wall made its small sound, and the sprinkler from a few houses down reached the faint edge of audibility. What do I do now? Ryan said. Ethan looked at him. You start, he said, with Lily. Ryan left through the side door the same way he'd come in, and Ethan stood in the kitchen for a long moment, listening to the sound of his footsteps cross the narrow strip of yard and disappear. I didn't know what Ryan was going to do with the conversation. He didn't know if the kid had the internal architecture to actually follow through on what that last exchange had implied. He'd seen grown men with decades of life experience fail to do harder things. He'd seen 20-year-olds with nothing but instinct and a genuine desire to be different, surprise everyone around them completely. He didn't know which kind Ryan was yet, but he'd meant what he said. He saw something in that kitchen that he hadn't seen in the driveway or the street or any of the preceding weeks. Something unguarded and real. And Ethan had spent 15 years learning to read people in situations where being wrong about what you saw cost lives, and what he'd seen in Ryan's face when he looked at Lily's photo on the refrigerator was not performance. It was not strategy. It was a young man encountering for possibly the first time in his 20 years the actual weight of someone else's life. That mattered. Whether anything came of it was a separate question, but it mattered. He washed both coffee mugs, dried them, put them away. He went back to work. Lily came home at 3:40 and dropped her bag by the door and said without preamble, "Something happened. I can see it on your face." Ryan came by, Ethan said. She stopped moving entirely. Here. To this house. Yes. When? About 2 hours ago. He kept his voice even factual. He wanted to talk. I let him in, and we talked. Lily stared at him. Her backpack was still half on one shoulder, suspended in the moment where she'd stopped. What did he say? He said he was an idiot, Ethan said. His word. And you said, I agreed with him. She stood there processing that for a moment. Then she let the backpack slide the rest of the way off her shoulder and onto the floor, and sat down at the kitchen table in the same chair Ryan had sat in 2 hours ago, and looked at her father with an expression that was working through about 6 things simultaneously. "I don't understand you," she said. But she didn't say it like an accusation. She said it like someone who was genuinely trying to map territory that kept expanding past the edges of her chart. "What part?" he said. "The part where he spent 3 weeks making our lives miserable. He said things about you at my school. He scratched your truck. He got his father to come over here and try to, and now you let him into our kitchen and you have coffee with him." She put her elbows on the table. Most people would be what?" he said. "Angrier," she said. "Or satisfied. Like, okay, he came crawling over to apologize, score 1 for us. But you're not either of those things. You're just—" She gestured vaguely at him. "You." He sat down across from her. "You know what I spent 15 years doing," he said. "Yes. Part of that job, a big part that people don't usually talk about, was understanding why people do what they do. Not just what, but why. Because if you only understand the what, you're always reacting. You're always one step behind. But if you understand the why—" He paused. "Then sometimes you can see where things are going before they arrive, and sometimes you can change where they're going." Lily was quiet, listening the way she listened when she knew something important was being said. "Ryan doesn't know who he is," Ethan said. "He knows who his father wants him to be. He knows who his gym friends think he is. He knows the character he's been playing. But underneath all of that, I think he's genuinely lost. And lost people are dangerous. Not because they're evil, but because they're searching for something to hold on to, and sometimes they grab the wrong things." She was looking at him very carefully. "Do you feel sorry for him?" "I thought about that, honestly. I feel something for him that's in the same neighborhood as sorry," he said. "Not sorry for what he did. He made choices and they were bad ones. But sorry that he got to 20 years old without anyone helping him understand the difference between strength and intimidation." He looked at his hands. "That's a failure, Lily. Not his alone. That's a failure of everybody around him." She chewed her lip. He could see her working it through. "You said something to him about me," she said. It wasn't a question. "I told him he needed to start with you," he said. She went very still. "Dad, you don't have to do anything," he said immediately. "Nothing at all. If he comes to you and you don't want to hear it, you say that. If he apologizes and it doesn't feel like enough, you say that too. You owe him absolutely nothing. This is about giving you the choice. Because what he did affected you directly, and that means the repair has to include you directly. That's not my decision to make." She sat with that for a long time. The refrigerator hummed. Outside, a car drove past. "When?" she said finally. "I don't know. If he's going to do it, I think he'll do it soon." She nodded. "Just once." Then she picked up her backpack and went to her room, and Ethan heard her door close, not slamming, just closing, the sound of someone who needed to be alone with something, and knew enough to take that space without drama. He started dinner. High made pasta, because it was her favorite, and because after a day like this one, familiarity was its own form of comfort. He made the sauce from scratch the long way, the way his mother had made it before he lost her, the way that took an hour and made the whole house smell like something good was happening. He chopped and stirred, and let the kitchen fill with warmth. And he thought about nothing in particular, which was something he had learned to do only after years of practice. The ability to be present in a moment without running calculations about past or future. To just be in the kitchen making sauce, and let that be enough. It was enough. For that hour, it was completely enough. The next morning, which was a Wednesday, Ethan was on his porch at 7:15 when Ryan's front door opened. Ryan came out. He was in jeans and a different plain shirt, still without the armor of his usual presentation. He stood on his own porch for a moment, and Ethan watched him without making it obvious he was watching. Ryan looked at Ethan's front porch, saw Ethan, nodded once. Ethan nodded back. Ryan stood there a moment longer. Then he walked down his porch steps and across his lawn and stopped at the property line. "She home," he said. "She leaves for school in 15 minutes, Ethan said. Ryan nodded. He looked at the ground, then at Ethan. "You think she'll—" "I don't know," Ethan said. But you should try regardless. Ryan nodded again. He stood at the property line and waited, which took a particular kind of courage that Ethan recognized. Not the courage of action, but the harder kind, the courage of standing still and being exposed and not running from it. Lily came out at 7:28, backpack on, earbuds around her neck instead of in her ears, which meant she'd already heard something through the window. She stopped on the top porch step and looked at Ryan standing at the property line and went very still. Ryan looked at her. "I need to say something," he said. His voice was steady, but the steadiness cost him something. Lily glanced at Ethan. He gave her nothing, no encouragement, no warning, just waited. She looked back at Ryan. "Okay," she said. "What I said to you," Ryan said. "That day in the yard, making jokes about your dad in front of your friends." He stopped, collected himself. "That was wrong. It was cruel and it was cowardly, and I did it to make myself feel bigger, and it made you feel smaller, and there is no version of that I can explain or justify." He paused. "And what I said to people at your school trying to make people think your dad was dangerous, that was worse. Because that was deliberate. I knew what I was doing, and I did it anyway." He looked at her directly. "I'm sorry. Not because my dad told me to be. Not because it helps me. Because you didn't deserve any of it, and you deserved better than what you got from me as a neighbor." The morning was completely still around them. Lily stood on the top step and looked at Ryan for a long moment. Ethan watched her face work through it, the hurt, the anger, the complicated process of deciding what to do with a genuine apology when you'd been preparing for inadequacy. "It was really hard," she said quietly. "Going to school and hearing those things. People looking at me differently. Sophie, she's my friend. She looked at me like I was someone who needed rescuing, like my home wasn't safe." Her voice stayed level, but only barely. "You didn't just come after my dad. You tried to change how people saw me." "I know," Ryan said. "I know that now." "Did you know it then?" A long pause. "Yes," Ryan said. "I knew." She nodded, once slow. Something in her expression shifted, not softening entirely, but resolving. Settling into something that was more complicated than anger, but less heavy. "Okay," she said. Ryan blinked. "Okay." "I heard you," she said. "That's all I'm saying right now. I heard you." She picked up her backpack strap with both hands. "I have to get to school." She came down the porch steps and walked to the end of the driveway and turned left, and Ryan watched her go and Ethan watched Ryan watch her, and the whole thing lasted about 30 seconds and contained more honesty than most conversations 3 times its length. Ryan turned back to Ethan. "Is that—" He didn't finish the question. "Give her time," Ethan said. "She heard you. That's not nothing." Ryan stood there a moment. Then he said, "Can I ask you something?" "Yes." "The training, the SEAL stuff, did you always—" He struggled with how to frame it. "Did you always know you were capable of that? Of what you did? Or did it surprise you too the first time?" Ethan looked at him. "The first time I had to do something I didn't know I was capable of," he said. "I was 23 years old, in a situation where thinking wasn't an option. Your body does what it's been prepared to do, and afterward—" He paused. "Afterward, you have to figure out who you are on the other side of it. That's the hard part. Not the doing, the after." Ryan absorbed that. "Is that what I'm doing now? Figuring out who I am on the other side of it?" "I think so," Ethan said. "Yes." Ryan nodded slowly. He looked at the ground, then at his house, then back at Ethan. "I quit the gym," he said. Ethan raised an eyebrow. "When?" "Yesterday morning," Ryan said. "I called and quit." "Why?" "Because I've been training for 2 years and I thought I was something. I thought what I was doing made me strong." He looked at Ethan. "It doesn't make you strong, it makes you physical. Those aren't the same thing." He paused. "I want to know the difference. I don't know how to learn it yet, but I want to know." Ethan looked at him for a long moment. "You want some advice?" "Yes." "Stop training to become something," Ethan said. "Start training to handle something. Those are different orientations. One is about ego, the other is about service. When you're training to become something, you're always looking in a mirror, measuring yourself against other people, proving a point, defending your image. When you're training to handle something, to be ready for whatever comes, to protect what matters, the mirror disappears. And paradoxically, that's when you actually become something. Ryan was quiet for a long time. Long enough that a car passed and a neighbor 2 houses down came out to collect his mail and went back inside. And the morning birds did their morning business, and the whole ordinary world kept turning. "I'm going to have to think about that," Ryan said. "I know," Ethan said. Ryan went home. Ethan finished his coffee. He thought about what he'd said, testing it the way he tested everything, not for whether it sounded good, but for whether it was true. He decided it was true. He'd learned it over 15 years in 100 different variations, and the core of it held up, the mirror disappears. That was real. He'd lived it. He went inside and started his workday. At 11:30 a.m., his phone rang. Not Jameson this time. The number was from the Colorado State Police. He answered. "Walker." "Mr. Walker, this is Detective Sarah Molina with the Douglas County Sheriff's Office. Do you have a few minutes?" He sat up straighter. "Yes." "We've received a complaint against you," she said. "Filed by a Victor Whitmore related to an incident at a neighborhood gathering approximately 5 days ago. The complaint alleges assault." The word hit the kitchen like something physical. He processed it in 2 seconds flat. Victor had filed a complaint. After coming to his porch and saying honest things and accepting his apology. After the handshake essentially of that morning's conversation. Victor Whitmore had gone home and filed a police complaint. He kept his voice completely steady. "I understand," he said. "I'd be happy to speak with you. I should tell you that the incident was witnessed by approximately 40 people, that Mr. Whitmore's son initiated physical contact, and that multiple recordings of the event were made by people present." A brief pause on Detective Molina's end. "You have access to those recordings." "I can get them," he said. Another pause. He could hear her writing something. "Would you be available to come in tomorrow morning?" "Yes," he said. "What time?" 9 a.m. "Do you want to bring an attorney?" He thought about it for exactly 1 second. "I'll be there at 9, he said. "I don't think I'll need an attorney, but I reserve the right to change that assessment." "Of course," she said. He ended the call. He sat for a moment with the phone in his hand. Victor had played the long game after all. The conversation on the porch, the honesty, the thank you for your service. All of it had been real, possibly in the moment. But Victor Whitmore was also a man who had built a real estate empire by covering all his angles. The complaint had probably been filed before the porch visit. A hedge. A legal position established before the conversation, giving him leverage regardless of how the conversation went. Smart. Infuriating. But smart, he called Marcus. "I need a favor," he said when Marcus picked up. "Name it." "I need whoever was recording at the festival to get me their footage. All of it. Every angle. I need it by tonight." A beat. "That's serious." Victor filed a complaint with the sheriff's office. Silence. Then, "That man." 3 words, tight and controlled, carrying about 100 more. "Can you do it?" Ethan said. "I already know 2 people who were there and filming," Marcus said. "Give me 3 hours." "Thank you," Ethan said. He hung up. He called Linda Okafor next. She picked up on the second ring. "Ethan," she said. And from just his name and her voice, he could tell she already knew something. Linda always already knew something. "Victor filed a police complaint," he said. "I heard," she said. Immediately, which meant her sources were even faster than he thought. "I have an interview at the sheriff's office tomorrow at 9, he said. "I'm going to need witness statements from anyone who saw what happened clearly and is willing to provide them." "I'll have you 4 by end of day," she said. "Mine will be the most detailed because I was standing 12 feet away, and I've been the neighborhood association secretary for 11 years, and I have extensive experience writing formal statements." Despite everything, something in him almost smiled. "Linda, thank you." "Don't thank me," she said briskly. Thank me when it's over. Is Lily okay? She doesn't know yet, he said. Tell her, Linda said. Don't protect her from it. She's tougher than you think. I know she is, he said. Then act like it, Linda said, and hung up. He sat with that for a moment. Then he got up and started making lunch because it was noon, and he hadn't eaten, and you couldn't fight anything on an empty stomach. That was basic. That was the most basic thing in the world. He was eating when his phone buzzed. A text from a number he didn't recognize. He opened it. This is Ryan. I heard what my father did. I didn't know he was going to do that. I want you to know I had nothing to do with it. He looked at the text for a moment. Then he typed back, I know. Thank you for telling me. A minute passed. Then, is there anything I can do? He thought about that. Thought about Ryan in his kitchen 2 days ago, hands flat on the table, asking what he should do now. Thought about Ryan on the porch this morning, delivering an apology that nobody had scripted for him. Yes, he typed back. If you're willing to give a written statement about what you saw and what you did, that would help. Your account would be significant because you're the one who initiated contact. The response took 5 full minutes. He ate his lunch. He waited. The text came. Okay. Tell me what I need to do. He put the phone down and looked at the ceiling for a moment. This was the twist he hadn't calculated. Ryan Whitmore, testifying against his own father's legal strategy. Against his own interest, against the easy path, against everything his upbringing had trained him to do. He picked the phone back up and typed, I'll send you the detective's information. Call and ask to make a voluntary statement. Don't embellish. Just tell exactly what happened in order starting from when you decided to confront me. Another minute. Then, all right. Ethan set his phone down. He finished his lunch. I thought about what Dr. Ewan had said about integration. About being both things at once. The man who had done those things in those places, and the man who made lunch at noon on a Wednesday. He thought about the fact that a 20-year-old kid who had 10 days ago stood in a neighborhood street trying to publicly humiliate him was about to call a detective's office and tell the truth at cost to himself. I thought about how that had happened. The sequence of it. Every choice, his and Ryan's, and even Victor's, leading to this particular moment, in this particular kitchen, on this particular Wednesday. He wasn't naive enough to think this made everything okay. The complaint was real. The legal process was real. The potential consequences were real, even if he was completely confident in the outcome. This was going to cost time and energy and stress that he didn't need and hadn't deserved. But there was something else present too, sitting right alongside the frustration. Something that felt, if he was careful and honest about naming it, like the beginning of something that might eventually become okay. He called Marcus back. How's the footage coming? Got 2 videos already, Marcus said. Crystal clear. Ryan throws first, you move. He goes down, you crouch, you talk to him, you walk away. A pause. Ethan. Anyone who watches this, there is no version of this where you're the aggressor. None. Good. Ethan said. Send them to me encrypted. Already done, Marcus said. And I've got 2 more coming in the next hour. You're a good man, Marcus. I know, Marcus said. You can tell that to whoever needs to hear it. Ethan almost laughed. Almost. He hung up and went back to work. At 4:15, Lily came home. She dropped her bag by the door, came into the kitchen, looked at his face and said, What happened now? Not a question. A statement. He told her everything. The police complaint. The interview tomorrow. The footage. Ryan's text. All of it in order without softening any of it the way Linda had told him to, and the way he'd already known was right. She sat at the table and listened to all of it without interrupting. When he finished, she was quiet for a moment. Victor filed the complaint after he came and apologized to you, she said. Yes. He stood on our porch and said thank you, and then filed a police complaint. The complaint was probably filed before he came over, Ethan said. He covered both angles. Lily's jaw was set in a way that he recognized. That's disgusting, she said. It's calculated, Ethan said. It's also ultimately going to fail because the facts are clear and 40 people saw them. But yes, It's not admirable. And Ryan. She stopped. Ryan is going to call the detective. If he follows through. Do you think he will? Ethan thought about Ryan's hands flat on the kitchen table, about the way he'd looked at Lily's photo, about the apology on the porch this morning that nobody had written for him. Yes, he said. I think he will. Lily sat with that. She put her elbows on the table and her chin in her hands and stared at the middle distance with an expression that was doing something complicated. He's going against his own father, she said. Yes, Ethan said. She paused. That's actually a hard thing to do. Yes, he said. It is. She was quiet for another moment. Are you scared? She said. About tomorrow. He thought about what to say. He thought about honesty, and about what she needed to hear, and whether those were the same thing. He decided they were. No, he said. I know what happened, and the truth is on record, and I have footage and witnesses and Ryan's statement. I'm not scared. He looked at her. What I am is tired. I'm tired of this taking up space in our life. I'm tired of having to think about Ryan Whitmore and Victor Whitmore and legal complaints and neighborhood dynamics, when what I want to be thinking about is your chemistry homework and whether you want pasta or soup for dinner. She looked at him for a long moment. Then something in her face shifted. The set jaw relaxed slightly, and she reached across the table and put her hand over his, briefly, in the gesture of a person much older than 15. Pasta, she said. Obviously. He looked at her hand on his. Obviously, he agreed. She pulled her hand back and reached for her backpack. I'll do homework in my room. Call me when it's ready. Lily, he said. She stopped, turned back. You handled everything these past few weeks really well, he said. Better than most adults would have. She looked at him. I had a good example, she said. She went to her room. He sat at the kitchen table for a minute just sitting. The afternoon light came through the window at its particular autumn angle, and the house was warm, and the day had been long and complicated and was not over yet. He got up. He started making pasta. At 6:47 p.m. His phone buzzed with a message from a number he'd given to Ryan, a screenshot of a calendar confirmation from the Douglas County Sheriff's Office. Voluntary witness interview. Thursday 10:00 a.m. Ryan had made the call. Ethan stared at the screenshot for a moment. Then he set his phone face down on the counter and went back to the stove. Lily called from her room asking how much longer. And he called back 15 minutes and she said she was starving. And he said that was impossible. And she said it was definitely possible. And he said, come set the table then. She came and set the table. They ate. Outside the neighborhood turned from evening into night, ordinary and quiet, the way it always had been, and the way he had always needed it to be. Inside, a father and his daughter talked about nothing important and everything that mattered, and the pasta was good, and the kitchen was warm, and for right now, in this moment, that was the whole world. Ethan arrived at the Douglas County Sheriff's Office at 8:52 a.m. He wore the same thing he wore every day. Clean jeans, a plain dark shirt, his good boots. He didn't dress up. He didn't dress down. He walked in the way he walked everywhere, which was the way he'd been trained to walk into any environment, aware, calm, and taking up exactly the amount of space he needed, and not 1 inch more. Detective Sarah Molina was younger than he'd expected. Mid-30s, sharp eyes, the kind of stillness that told him she was good at her job. She shook his hand across her desk and gestured to the chair across from her, and he sat, and she looked at him for a moment before she opened her folder. Thank you for coming in, she said. Of course, he said. I want to be upfront with you, she said. I've already reviewed 3 video recordings of the incident submitted by neighborhood residents. I've also received a voluntary statement this morning from Ryan Whitmore. She paused, watching his face. I'm going to be honest, this interview is largely a formality, but I want to hear your account in your own words, he told her. Calmly, in order, without editorializing. The push in the chest. The first punch. The takedown attempt. What he'd done in response and why. The words he'd said to Ryan when Ryan was on the ground. His exact language when he walked away. She wrote as he spoke. When he finished, she set down her pen. "Mr. Walker," she said, "I'm going to ask you something that isn't strictly relevant to the complaint, and you don't have to answer it." "Ask," he said. Ryan Whitmore's statement, and I've read it twice now, is one of the most straightforward, voluntary, self-incriminating statements I've received in 6 years in this office. He didn't minimize anything. He didn't deflect. He described his own actions in detail that went beyond anything the videos show. She looked at him carefully. That doesn't happen. Not from a 20-year-old with a wealthy father and a defense attorney on retainer, which he has, by the way. That doesn't happen. She paused. What did you do? Ethan looked at her. I talked to him, he said. About what? About the difference between strength and performance, he said. And about what things are actually worth protecting. She held his gaze for a moment. Then she wrote something in her notes and closed the folder. The complaint will be dismissed, she said. Formally within 48 hours. The evidence is unambiguous, and Mr. Whitmore's own statement eliminates any remaining ambiguity. She paused. I'll also be recommending that the department note Mr. Victor Whitmore's filing as potentially retaliatory in nature, given the timeline. Ethan nodded. Thank you. Don't thank me, she said. The facts did this. She stood and extended her hand again. Take care of yourself, Mr. Walker. He shook it. You too, detective. He walked out of the building at 9:34 a.m. into a bright Colorado morning. He stood on the sidewalk for a moment. He breathed. The air was clean and cold, and carried the particular clarity of high altitude that he had loved since the first day he'd moved here. The sense that the world was just slightly more honest up here, closer to the sky, further from the noise. His phone buzzed. Marcus Well. He typed back. Dismissed. 48 hours. The response was immediate, a single word in capital letters that Ethan smiled at briefly before putting his phone away. He drove home. He was in his driveway when his phone buzzed again. This time it was an unknown number, but the text identified itself immediately. This is Ryan. Detective Molina called me after your interview. She said the complaint is being dismissed. I'm glad. A pause in the text, then I know that doesn't fix anything. But I'm glad. Ethan sat in his truck for a moment. Then he typed, It fixes more than you know. Thank you, Ryan. He went inside. He sat at his desk. He opened his laptop. He did 4 hours of work with the focused, complete attention of a man who had spent the morning having one chapter of his life formally closed, and was now deliberately returning to the ordinary forward motion of living. At 2 p.m. he made coffee and stood at the kitchen window and let himself feel the relief. Not dramatically, not with any fanfare, just quietly standing in his kitchen with a mug, allowing the tension of the past 3 weeks to begin slowly, incrementally to release its grip. It didn't all go at once. That wasn't how these things worked. He knew that better than most. The body kept its own accounting separate from the mind's official declarations of resolution. He'd be alert for a while still. He'd still register Ryan's front door opening. He'd still notice if a car sat too long in front of the house. Some of that would fade in weeks. Some of it would take longer. But the crisis was over. The legal threat was resolved. And something else, something he hadn't fully allowed himself to count on, had happened too. Something that didn't have a formal name in legal proceedings or police reports. Something had changed. He was still thinking about that when Lily came home. She walked in the door at 3:45 and looked at him and said, Tell me. He told her. The interview. Molina's words. The dismissal. Ryan's text. She sat down. She was quiet for a long time. Long enough that he waited, not filling the silence because she needed the space to feel whatever she was feeling without him organizing it for her. It's over, she said finally. The legal part, he said. Yes. She looked at him carefully. What about the other part? Which part is that? She chewed her lip. The part where we still live next to them. He nodded slowly. That part is different, he said. That part is going to take time. I don't know exactly what it looks like. Neither does Ryan. Neither does Victor, probably. He paused. But I think the worst of it is behind us. She was quiet again. Then, Ryan texted you. Yes. What did it feel like reading it? He thought about that honestly, because she was asking honestly, and she deserved the same. It felt like watching something begin, he said. Not end. Begin. She looked at him with those eyes that saw further than they had any right to. You actually care if he turns out okay, she said. Not accusing him, just noticing. Yes, he said. Why? I thought about it. Because he's 20 years old, and he's still being written, he said. The story isn't finished, and I've seen enough people get to the end of their story without anyone telling them the truth soon enough to change anything. If telling Ryan the truth now means 10 or 20 or 40 years from now, he's someone different than he was building toward being. He stopped, looked at his coffee mug. That matters. I don't know why it matters to me specifically, but it does. She looked at him for a long time. Then she stood up and did something she hadn't done since she was about 12 years old. She walked around the table and hugged him. Not the quick obligatory hug of a teenager tolerating parental affection. A real one. Both arms full contact, the kind that meant something. He held on to her. I'm proud of you, she said into his shoulder. I know that's a weird thing for a kid to say to a parent, but I am. He didn't trust his voice for a moment. Thank you, Lily, he said. She pulled back. She looked slightly embarrassed by herself, which was so specific and so familiar that it helped him find his footing again. Don't make it weird, she said. Too late, he said. She went to her room. He stood in the kitchen and breathed. 3 days later, Linda Okafor knocked on his door. He opened it. She was standing on his porch with Biscuit on his leash, and an expression that he'd come to recognize as Linda about to deliver news, which was different from Linda making conversation in a way that was hard to articulate, but entirely visible. Victor Whitmore's house is going on the market, she said. Ethan blinked. When? Listing goes up Thursday, she said. I heard from Carol, who heard from the realtor directly. Victor is buying Ryan out of the property. Ryan is keeping an apartment in Denver. She paused. Victor is going back to his house in Cherry Hills. He apparently decided the neighborhood wasn't a good fit. Ethan stood with that for a moment. Processed it. The Mercedes in the driveway. Victor on his porch saying honest things. Victor filing a legal complaint 8 hours later. Victor's investigator pulling a military file that had clearly recalibrated something in the man's strategic thinking. And now, Victor pulling out entirely. It was in its way a very Victor Whitmore resolution. When a position became untenable, you withdrew and redeployed. You didn't apologize. You didn't make a scene. You just quietly repositioned and let everyone understand that the engagement was over on your own terms, even when it obviously wasn't. What about Ryan? Ethan said. The apartment in Denver, Linda said. He's already moved most of his things. The big furniture went yesterday. She looked at him steadily. He's not gone yet. He's coming back for the last of it this weekend. I thought you'd want to know. Thank you, he said. Linda, for everything. She waved a hand. Oh, don't. I have extensive experience writing formal statements, and I was looking for an excuse to use it. But she softened the deflection with a slight smile. You're good people, Ethan. This street is better for having you on it. Biscuit pushed his enormous head against Ethan's leg with profound enthusiasm. And Biscuit agrees, she said. She walked away. He stood on his porch and watched her go, and thought about the particular way that communities worked, not as single unified organisms, but as collections of individual choices, each person deciding every day what they were going to contribute and what they were going to overlook and what they were going to stand up for. Linda had stood up. Dave and Patrice had stood up. Marcus had stood up. Small things, all of them. But small things in the same direction at the right moment added up to something that bent the outcome. He owed them. Not in a way that could be repaid directly, but in a way that he'd carry. On Saturday morning, Ethan was on his porch at 7:30 when Ryan's truck, a simple gray pickup, nothing like the Challenger or the Porsche, pulled up. Ryan got out alone. No friends, no entourage. He walked to his front door, went inside and started carrying boxes out. Ethan watched for a few minutes, then he stood up. He walked across the yard to the property line. "You need help," he called. Ryan stopped on his porch steps with a box in his arms and looked at him. The look lasted about 3 seconds. Surprise first, then something working through it, then something that settled. "Yeah," Ryan said. "Actually, yeah, I could use a hand." Ethan walked over. They carried boxes for an hour. They didn't talk much. There wasn't a lot to say that hadn't already been said. And they were both the kind of person who understood that sometimes the most honest thing two people can do is work alongside each other in silence and let the work be the conversation. Ryan was stronger than Ethan had given him credit for in non-combat contexts, efficient, methodical, not wasting motion. He'd clearly been taught at some point how to actually work. When the truck was mostly loaded, Ryan sat on the tailgate and drank from a water bottle and looked at the house. Ethan leaned against the side of the truck and did the same. "Do you think it would have been different?" Ryan said. "If you'd come over that first day, introduced yourself." "Maybe," Ethan said. "Probably. I don't know. You were already who you were when you arrived. Whether you would have been willing to see it differently that early." He shrugged. "Hard to say." Ryan nodded. "I want to say I would have," he said. "But I don't know if that's true. I was pretty committed to being an idiot." "You were pretty committed," Ethan agreed. Ryan looked sideways at him. Something that might have been a laugh if it had gone a little further. "That's as close as you get to giving me a hard time, isn't it?" "Pretty much," Ethan said. Ryan looked back at the house. "I don't know what I'm doing in Denver," he said. "I don't have a plan. I quit the gym. I'm not fighting anymore. I'm basically starting from nothing at 20 years old with a trust fund and no idea what I actually want to be." He paused. "That's a weird place to be." "It's a better place than having the wrong idea of what you want to be," Ethan said. Ryan considered that. "Yeah," he said. "I think that's right." A minute of quiet. "What would you do?" Ryan said. "If you were me. Starting over 20 years old, no direction." Ethan looked at the sky. He thought about it seriously because it was a serious question, and Ryan was asking it seriously, which was different from every other way Ryan had ever asked anything. "I'd find something bigger than myself to organize around," he said. "Not a performance, not a brand. Something that needs you and doesn't care what you look like doing it. Something with actual stakes." He paused. "I don't know if that's military. Might not be right for you. Could be medicine. Could be teaching. Could be something with your hands that builds something real. But find something where the test is real, where failing means something." He looked at Ryan. "You've been training in environments where the worst that happens if you lose is your pride. Find an environment where the stakes are real and see who you are there." Ryan was quiet for a long time, long enough that Ethan didn't try to fill it. "That's terrifying," Ryan said finally. "Yes," Ethan said. "That's how you know it's right." Ryan turned the water bottle in his hands, turned it again. "My father thinks I'm making a mistake. Quitting the gym, leaving here, not having a plan. He thinks I'm just reacting, running away." "Are you?" Ethan said. Ryan thought about it with real honesty. "No," he said. "I don't think so. I think for the first time I'm actually walking toward something instead of away from something. I just don't know what it is yet." "That's okay," Ethan said. "That's actually the right order. Know the direction before you know the destination." Ryan looked at him. "How long does that take to figure out?" "Depends," Ethan said. "If you pay attention, really pay attention, not just go through the motions and you're honest with yourself when you get it wrong." He paused. "Not as long as you'd think." Ryan nodded. He stood up from the tailgate and put the water bottle in the cab and turned back to the last few things on the porch. Ethan helped him load the last of it. When the truck was full and the house was empty, Ryan stood in the driveway and looked at the front door for a long moment. Ethan stood nearby and let him look. "I was a real piece of work," Ryan said. "Yes," Ethan said. "I could have actually hurt you. Or Lily. Not physically, I mean." He stopped. "The school stuff. The rumors. I could have done real damage." "You could have," Ethan said. "You chose not to in the end. Only because you put me on the ground, Ryan said. "I'm not sure I would have chosen differently if you hadn't." Ethan looked at him. "Maybe not," he said. "But you did choose differently when it counted. Ryan, that's not nothing. You can build on a choice that cost you something. You can't build on a choice you never made." Ryan stood with that for a moment. He pressed his mouth together, nodded once. He extended his hand. Ethan shook it. It lasted about 2 seconds. Firm, direct, no performance in it. Just two people acknowledging something that had happened between them and would always have happened between them, and couldn't be taken back, the bad parts, or the parts that had come after. "Take care of your daughter," Ryan said. "Always," Ethan said. Ryan got in the truck. He drove away. Ethan stood in the empty driveway of the house next door for a moment. The house sat quiet and vacant, slightly different, now that it was empty already, beginning the process of becoming just a house again, waiting for whoever came next to write their life into its walls. He walked back across the yard to his own porch. He sat down. He picked up his coffee, which was cold. He drank it anyway. He sat there for a long time. I thought about 15 years. He thought about missions he would never be able to describe to anyone who hadn't been there, and a few that he couldn't describe even to people who had. He thought about the very specific calculus of a life spent in proximity to violence. What it did to you, what it took from you. What if you were careful and intentional, and a little lucky it left you with? He thought about what it left you with. It left you with this, he thought. The ability to sit on a porch on a Saturday morning and feel the difference between danger and peace, and know in your body, and not just your mind, that right now, this moment, everything that matters is safe. That was not a small thing. That was everything. I was still on the porch when Lily came out. She had her hair up and her favorite oversized sweatshirt on, and she was carrying 2 fresh mugs of coffee, which meant she'd been watching from inside and had timed it. She handed him the fresh mug without comment, and sat in the other porch chair and pulled her knees up to her chest and looked at the empty driveway next door. "He's gone," she said. "Yes." She nodded. She wrapped both hands around her mug. "How do you feel?" He thought about the honest answer. "Like something that needed to happen happened," he said. "And like I'm glad it's over. And like..." He stopped. "And like what?" she said. He looked at her. At the particular way the morning light was sitting on her face, the specific angle and quality of it that he had never been able to predict and always noticed and would never be able to describe to anyone, because it was one of those things that existed only in the living of it. His daughter. 15 years old. Her mother's eyes and his stubbornness and something entirely her own that had nothing to do with either of them. "And like I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be," he said. She looked at him. Her mouth did the thing it did when she was trying not to let him see that something landed. She looked back at the street. "That's very corny, Dad," she said. "I know," he said. "I mean really corny." "I know." She sipped her coffee. "But okay," she said, quietly. "Me too." They sat on the porch together, and the morning moved around them, the way mornings do, incrementally, unhurriedly, with complete indifference to anything that had come before, and complete openness to anything that might come next. A neighbor walked a dog. A car passed. 2 houses down, someone was already mowing their lawn, the sound of it familiar and almost musical in its ordinariness. 2 weeks later, Ethan got a letter. Not a text. Not an email. An actual letter, handwritten in an envelope with a Denver return address that he didn't recognize until he saw the name in the upper left corner. Ryan Whitmore. He opened it standing at the kitchen counter. The handwriting was slightly uneven. Not bad, just unpracticed, the handwriting of someone who didn't write letters often, which was most people under 30. The letter was 2 pages front and back of a single folded sheet. Ryan had enrolled at a community college in Denver. Not for a degree in anything in particular, he'd signed up for a psychology course, and a philosophy course, and something called Introduction to Emergency Medicine, that he'd found by accident while browsing the catalog, and had registered for on impulse, because it sounded like something with actual stakes. He didn't know where it was going. He wasn't sure it was going anywhere. But it was something to organize around, and the stakes felt real, And he thought about what Ethan had said about finding something where failing meant something, and decided to try. He'd also started volunteering. A veteran support organization in Denver. Not because he had any personal connection to military service, but because someone at the community college had put up a flyer, and he'd thought about Ethan, and thought about the afternoon in the kitchen, and thought something bigger than myself. He showed up. They put him to work. He was not good at it yet. He was, by his own description, frequently in the way, and often uncertain about what was needed, and sometimes said the wrong thing. But he kept showing up. He wrote, "I don't know if any of this makes up for anything. I don't think it's supposed to. I think it's supposed to be its own thing. But I wanted you to know because you asked me what I was going to do, and I gave you a vague answer, and this is the less vague answer." He wrote, "Tell Lily. I hope school is going well. I know I don't really have standing to ask that, but I hope it anyway." He wrote at the end in slightly larger letters than the rest, as if he'd pressed down harder on the pen. "You told me strength means having the power to hurt someone and choosing not to. I've been thinking about that every day. I think I'll be thinking about it for a long time." Ethan read the letter twice. Then he folded it carefully and set it on the kitchen counter. He stood there for a moment. I thought about a lot of things. He thought about the scratch on his truck. He thought about Ryan standing in the street with his fighting gloves and his audience and his father watching from the curb. He thought about the 2 seconds before Ryan threw the first punch, when the door had stood open briefly and Ryan had looked at it and then closed it. He thought about what it took to reopen a door like that. How much harder it was the second time. How much it cost. I thought about the Veterans Organization. He picked up his phone. He called Jameson. "Hey," Jameson said. "All clear on the legal situation?" "All clear," Ethan said. "Dismissed 2 weeks ago." "Good. Good." A pause. "You called just to tell me that?" "No," Ethan said. "I have a young man in Denver, 20 years old, no military background. Volunteers with a veterans organization there. I don't know which one. He's figuring out what he wants to be." He paused. "If there's anyone in your network in Denver who works with vets programs and might be willing to keep an eye out for someone worth investing some time in, not charity. Investment. He's going to be worth something, I think, if he gets pointed right." Jameson was quiet for a moment. "This the kid who started the whole thing?" "Yes," Ethan said. A long pause. "You're something else, Walker," Jameson said, but it wasn't a criticism. "Can you make a call?" Ethan said. "I can make a call," Jameson said. "No promises on outcomes." "No promises needed," Ethan said. "Just a call." "Done," Jameson said. "Give my best to Lily." "Always," Ethan said. He hung up. He stood in the kitchen. He put the phone face down on the counter next to Ryan's letter. He looked at both of them for a moment, the phone and the letter, and everything. They represented all the invisible connections between people that formed and held, and sometimes unexpectedly turned into something that looked nothing like where they'd started. He went to his desk and opened his laptop and did 2 hours of work. At noon he made lunch. A sandwich, nothing complicated. Standing at the counter eating it and looking out the window at the street. The house next door still sat empty. It would have a new listing on Thursday. Someone new would come. They would bring their own lives and their own complications and their own ways of being in the world, and the street would absorb them the way streets absorbed everyone incrementally over time. He finished his lunch. He washed the plate. I thought about what Lily had asked him weeks ago in the thick of everything, when it had felt like something fundamental about their ordinary life was under threat. She'd asked, "Are you scared?" And he'd told her he wasn't scared. He was alert. He thought about that now. I thought about what scared actually was for someone like him. Not the presence of danger. He'd been in proximity to danger for 15 years, and his relationship with it was too complicated for fear to be the right word. What scared him, if he was honest, was different. What scared him was the possibility of failing to protect what mattered, of making the wrong call in the wrong moment and having to live with the consequence. He had not made the wrong call. Not in the driveway. Not at the festival. Not in the kitchen with Ryan. Not on the phone with Victor. Not once through any of it had he acted from anger or pride or the particular need to prove something that had cost other people so much in his experience. He had acted from the only motive that had ever in his life produced outcomes he could live with. He had acted from the knowledge of what he was protecting and why it was worth protecting. Lily came home at 3:40. She dropped her bag. She came into the kitchen. She saw Ryan's letter on the counter. She looked at him. "Read it," he said. She picked it up. She read it. He watched her face move through its skepticism at first, then something softening, then something that was harder to name. She set it down. "He's volunteering with veterans," she said. "Yes." "That's—" She paused. Looked at the letter again. "That's actually real." "Yes," he said. "I think it is." She looked at him. "Did you have something to do with it?" He thought about how to answer that. "I had a conversation with him," he said. "He made his own choices." She held his gaze. She knew there was more to it than that, and he knew she knew, and they both knew she was going to let him have the partial answer, because she understood that some of his moves were things he did quietly and didn't explain, and that was part of who he was. "Okay," she said. She handed the letter back to him. "Tell me what's for dinner." "What do you want?" he said. She thought about it. "That pasta you made, the long way, with the sauce that takes an hour." He looked at her. "That takes an hour," he said. "I know," she said. "We have time." He looked at his daughter standing in his kitchen in the afternoon light with her backpack by the door and her hair still up and her mother's eyes and the particular quality of complete unshakable trust that she extended to him every single day without making a production of it, just quietly and completely, the way strong things are quiet and complete. He went to the cabinet, got out the pot, filled it with water, set it on the stove. He started chopping. The kitchen filled with the sound and smell of something being made the right way. Lily sat at the table and did her homework, and occasionally asked him something about the recipe, or about her chemistry homework, or about nothing in particular, and he answered, and the hour passed, the way the best hours pass slowly enough to be felt full enough to be sufficient. Outside the neighborhood did what neighborhoods do. It turned from afternoon into evening. Lights came on in windows. Cars pulled into driveways. Dogs got walked. The ordinary machinery of living moved forward the way it always had and always would, carrying everyone along in it, whether they were ready or not. Inside that house on that street, a man who had spent 15 years walking through the darkest corners of the world in service of something larger than himself, stood at a stove making his daughter's favorite meal. And the sauce took exactly 1 hour, and it was exactly right. And when they sat down to eat it, Lily said, "This is so good," with the complete sincerity of someone who meant exactly what they said, and nothing more and nothing less. He said, "I know." She said, "You're impossible." He said, "Eat your dinner." She ate her dinner. And Ethan Walker, who had survived things that would never make it into any story he told, who had carried weight that most people would buckle under, and carried it without bending, who had looked into the worst that human beings were capable of, and chosen every single time to walk back toward the best. Ethan Walker sat across from his daughter in the kitchen of a small house in Colorado, and felt in the clearest and most